All right, we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. My name is Faraz. I'm here with Zach. Let's do it, man. Week one is almost a wrap for week one. We still got
Right.
Monday Night Football game tonight. Crazy start to week one, man. This was a very interesting Sunday. A lot of overachievers, a lot of underachievers, a lot of guys, did what they were supposed to do, but not everybody's happy, after week one
No.
for fantasy, right? A lot of expectations, a lot of high expectations on a lot of players and a lot of letdowns. But we'll get all into it. And just want to say off the bat, it's only 1 week. It's only week one. Let's everybody just like relax. Everyone take a deep breath.
Deep breath.
All right. It's gonna be okay. I'm wearing my take it easy shirt. Okay. Everyone just take it easy. All right. It's only week one. And things will kind of progress as we go. And we're going to break it all down for you in this episode, talking about all, the major things you need to know about kind of, backfield splits and who's getting targets and who's running routes and all that kind of stuff that you want to know in terms of who's fantasy relevant, who's not, who should I drop, who's looking good. We're going to talk about all that in this episode. So stay tuned for all of that. But first of all, Zach, how was your first Sunday, man?
It was great for the most part, except for my Cowboys getting, smoked on Sunday Night Football. That was about it. And Dak Prescott being out. That really makes me upset because I had a lot of CD Lamb shares and now I'm not feeling so good. But other than that, if you'll let me bring it up, I did, I think, beat you officially this first week already, even with the Monday night game yet to be played.
It wasn't even close, man. It wasn't even close. You kicked my ass this week. I had nobody, I had nobody kind of hit that, big game this week. Right. Like I think you had maybe one or two players who went off and, a couple of decent performances too, that kind of, held you off. So you have a good team, man. So like, I think right now you might be the team to go through in the Upper Hand Fantasy Community League. But we'll see. It's been, it's crazy. Like even before the season started, there was like how many trades happened? Like since the day we started, the day we drafted, like which is only like a week before the season started, there's already been a few trades. So I feel like this community league that we have is going to be pretty active. But yeah, man, I didn't want to go up against you week one, but I had to, get the toughest matchup out of the way.
I'm kind of looking at the scores here. The only guy that really let you down was your boy Allen Robinson. Outside of that, solid performances across the board.
Yeah, I guess
Michael Pittman,
it was right. It was solid, but it's like you kind of, if you want to beat a good opponent, you kind of have to have like a one or two blow up performances. I think Pittman probably was my best player. I would say. And hey, listen, man. Speaking of Michael Pittman, Michael Pittman. I actually didn't have him on the show sheet, but might as well talk about him. We talked about this, as being a player who is going to come through this year and potentially be that, elite receiver. And even on a Colts offense, that was kind of slow to start. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor was able to do his thing, but the Texans, they got ahead in this game. And it's not because they were amazing. It was mostly because the Colts were a little bit kind of underachieved a little bit, early in that game. But Michael Pittman, it looks like he's going to get his targets, and Matt Ryan's looking for him, and he's getting that target share. No one's really competing with him, in target share. Alec Pierce, nowhere to be found. He had a couple of end zone targets, but a
couple of drops too.
That's about it. Yeah, he had that touchdown drop. But that's all he would have had in that game. Paris Campbell, not really, running a full route participation. You have Ashton Doolin, kind of sharing that load a little bit too. He's an interesting, dynasty add if he's available in dynasty leagues. But we digress.
Yes.
I think that was it was an interesting game, and we'll get into that. We'll get into Dameon Pierce and all that. But let's get started. We're gonna go in order of how we plan to get the show going. AJ Brown, man. AJ Brown was somebody that I wanted to talk about because we looked at AJ Brown coming to Philly as like initially a lot of reaction, and going into the season a lot of people said like this isn't going to work. This is a run heavy offense. Jalen Hurts stinks. AJ Brown, this is not a better situation for him. And I think both you and I were both like actually like it might actually be kind of good because AJ Brown's a baller. He's an alpha, and he's gonna eat first. I
Yeah.
understand they have talented receivers there like Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, but are we surprised by this? Because I'm not.
No. And I'm not only not surprised, I'm actually extremely encouraged because, like we said, he had 10 catches on 13 targets for 155 yards. The Eagles scored all these touchdowns, and he didn't have any of them, which means if he gets a touchdown, that's nuclear performance we're talking about. And this was already crazy enough. He got 30, was it 34? Was it 40% target share? 34,
40% target. Yep, it was 40% target share. Yep.
Which is bordering on what we saw Devontae Adams do, but we'll get to him later. But he looked right at home in the Eagles offense. It looked like I thought it felt like he belonged there the whole time. I look at his time with the Titans. I'm like, AJ Brown, he actually looks better in an Eagles uniform too, I think. But this guy, this is exactly what I anticipated. And people are like, oh, Devontae Smith, he might be a factor getting targets. I've never seen Devontae Smith as a guy that will dominate or demand target share like AJ Brown does. And we talked about that a lot on the podcast and going into the season. And this is just kind of manifestation of what we've been talking about. And, this is best case scenario and, really encouraging for the future.
They were pass first. Okay. They were not run heavy like a lot of people thought they were. Just because they did it last year doesn't mean they would do it this year. They were pass heavy. They had a lead in the third quarter and they were still pass first. I think they were dropping back around 70% of the time still, even with a couple touchdown lead. Okay. So this is their philosophy. That's what they're going to do. Okay. And then you look at the other guys, Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, 4 targets and 3 targets. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So AJ Brown, wide receiver 1 season. It is what it is. Deal with it. Elijah Mitchell, moving on. We're going to be jumping around all over the place, guys. So we just want to kind of hit on those points. So we don't really want to go game by game because we want to really hit on the major points, as we go through this. All right. So we're going to move on to Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell hurts his knee in this game. Speculation is that it's an MCL injury, and he could be out a few weeks. He had a pretty big brace on his knee, couldn't bend it, going to the team bus. And a lot of the medical experts online are looking at this like a potential MCL sprain, which could mean that he'll be out for at least a few weeks. Jeff Wilson would be the pickup here. Seahawks next week should be a pretty good matchup for him. It's possible that he plays a 3-down role because he was the 3rd down back with Mitchell on the field. Mitchell's looking good too, man. But this was the issue with Mitchell, right? Like it's so hard. He's made of glass, dude. And I hate saying that about players, but I mean, dude, like this is literally what we were talking about, right? Mm-hmm. About him. Like, hey man, hope he can stay healthy. And that's part of the reason why Shanahan was trying to bring these other running backs in, but it just turned out that guys like Tyrion Davis-Price and Trey Sermon, weren't going to do their thing on this team. So yeah, Jeff Wilson, priority waiver wire pickup this week. Good matchup against the Seahawks next week, potentially involved in the passing game as well. He could be a solid RB2 for you if you need someone to pick up.
Right. And, like you're saying about Elijah Mitchell being made of glass, you don't want to say that. True. But that is what we've talked about the whole time this offseason. And he was actually relatively efficient, when he was on the field. He looked like Elijah Mitchell that we knew. He averaged, just under 7 yards a carry. He looked good. He didn't get anything in the passing game. I mean, he got out of the game early, so we don't know if he would have gotten anything in the passing game or not. But at this point, you just kind of move forward. This is something that we're not surprised by. It sounds bad to say we're not surprised that he's injured, but, that's been his problem his whole career, and it's kind of coming up again this season. So now it's on to the next guy. Jeff Wilson definitely is the priority pickup. Talk about Tyrion Davis-Price or anybody like that. I wouldn't worry about rostering them unless they show out in these next couple of weeks. Elijah Mitchell, I hoped he would stay healthy, but it's already happening. It's like, it's just one of the bummers of this weekend for me for fantasy because I was kind of hoping we get to see more of him than a couple, like what was it, a quarter and a half of action, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player, you know what I mean? And you don't want to see that because he could have had a monster year given he was basically handed the keys to the backfield, and, for a second straight year and for a guy who was drafted late, that's what you want to see. You kind of root for these guys. But yeah.
The field conditions, weren't doing anyone any favors either. That was just a rough game. I'm surprised anyone got anything going through the air. That Justin Fields had 2 passing touchdowns. I'm
surprised there weren't more injuries in that game, right? Like Elijah Mitchell, he was the one who had to take one for the team, but there was a lot of injuries that could have happened in that game. It was cool. Like it was cool at the end, like how Justin Fields, like he knelt down and then like just the whole team they knew what they were gonna do. They ran to the end zone. They were in
Yeah.
Chicago and they did a little slide in the rain. That was cool as hell, man. That was such a cool moment right there.
That reminded me of the Niners game and at the time football team game. Remember that one?
Yeah,
That
that
was
was a
like 2
bad.
weeks ago. 2 years ago, was it?
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
rough one.
Yeah.
Speaking of that same team, Deebo Samuel was very involved in the run game with
Yeah.
8 carries. How much of that was because Jeff Wilson was because Elijah Mitchell was hurt? But it seems like he has no issues. There was a little bit of controversy about him not wanting to take carries out of the backfield and all that kind of stuff while they were negotiating that contract, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So the fact that he was able to get 8 carries and he scored, right? One of the things that about Deebo that we were worried about was him. Listen, like he didn't have that many carries last year, but he scored like what was it, 6 touchdowns or 8 touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it was 8.
Yeah, on the ground, which is still not sustainable. Now he got a ninth, yesterday. But I'm not, Deebo Samuel, he's going to be doing his thing, and he was able to get the target share in this game. It's really tough to get a lot out of this game just because of the fact that, it was a really messy game. Who knows what would have happened? Trey Lance did hit Ayuk early in the game, and you thought that, okay, it's going to get started, but it didn't happen after that. So we'll see how that works out. One bright note with Trey Lance is that he had one of the out of all the rushing quarterbacks in the league, he had one of the highest designed rushing rates, which is exactly what you want to see. Kyle Shanahan is drawing them up for Trey Lance, so continue to start him moving forward, despite him having not having a great game. Couldn't take much out of this game in those conditions.
Right
now, Khalil Herbert. I was going to move on. Do you have anything else?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, Deebo actually also saw 8 targets in the receiving game. I wouldn't take the inefficiency there. 2 catches, 14 yards. I wouldn't take that as anything. That's actually encouraging that Trey Lance is looking Deebo's way.
Yeah.
Like you said, can't use this game as a measuring stick. This is it was just horrific.
But it is still encouraging. It is still encouraging that
absolutely,
after the entire offseason of talking about Brandon Ayuk and his rapport with Trey Lance, and now Deebo Samuel, at least he's being looked at. That's good to know. Now moving on to the other side of the ball, Khalil Herbert, he was handling some goal line duties. Now David Montgomery was the clear 1A in that backfield, and I would probably consider him a number 1 and then Khalil number 2. However, he did have both of the Bears goal line carries, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's somebody that was on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues, more than 50% of leagues. He should be rostered, okay?
Yeah.
He also outperformed David Montgomery in terms of efficiency on his touches, and he did see a little bit of work later in the game. So I would say pick up Khalil Herbert as a solid handcuff. Can't really play him right now, but he's somebody that if you're looking for a handcuff to stash who's available in a lot of leagues, he's somebody to kind of just keep on your bench for now.
Yeah, he's kind of giving me shades of Tony Pollard with a goal line roll almost. And we don't want to say he has the goal line roll locked down. It might have just been how it worked out. But definitely encouraging what we saw from Khalil Herbert. You're right. He should be rostered, and could have been a lot worse, especially in that
if I had David Montgomery, if I have David Montgomery on my team, like I'll be a little worried, right? Because first of all, he's not getting that every down roll, right? That he had last year. It looks like Khalil Herbert might be taking some touches away, right? And goal line touches at that. And then on top of that, like there's not going to be that many goal line touches to go around, on this Bears offense, right? And on top of that, Justin Fields might take a lot of that. So it's just like, oh man, that's part of the reason why I wasn't targeting Montgomery this year. Just like the upside is just limited for him. Now they did each have 4 short yardage snaps, each of them. But it's going to be interesting to see how this moves forward, how this backfield moves going forward. Moving to New Orleans, Jarvis Landry. We've talked about him as a potential waiver wire pickup before week 1, right? And Zach, you were shitting on me about that a little bit.
Yes, I was.
Well, low-key shitting on me about it. But hey, he led the Saints in receiving, 7 catches, 114 yards. So the same number of targets as Michael Thomas. Actually, one more target than Michael Thomas, who had 2 touchdowns himself. Okay.
Right.
Jarvis Landry had a 27% target share. And and Michael Thomas had a 23.5% target share. Chris Olave, also, he's a full-time receiver. He did break through to the starting lineup. So when these guys are in 11 personnel, which that was their base offense this year, in this game, Chris Olave was a full-time receiver. He just didn't get the targets on this game. But these three guys basically got the same number of routes run. So that's a great sign for Olave. Keep him on your bench. It's very possible that he overtakes someone like Jarvis Landry for that target share. Okay. However, I'm still picking up Jarvis Landry. He was available on more than 50% of leagues going into week one. He's somebody you want to pick up. Like we mentioned, guys like Jarvis Landry, who maintained that target share year after year after year over the last 7 years, he literally had that same target share in week one. So pick him up. You can start him next week as a flex. And then if he does it again, then you kind of have to keep him in your lineup in week 3, right? That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Michael Thomas, he's back, man. He's back. Yeah. 2 touchdowns. Jameis looking for him. Looking good. I'm glad he didn't have any setbacks or anything like that. He's in your lineup next week.
And the thing that's interesting to me, watching Michael Thomas, if you watch his 2 touchdowns, they're both on like the same play, and they were both like trust throws. His back shoulder coming back with tight coverage. Obviously, Jameis Winston trusts Michael Thomas in that situation, which is awesome to see, especially considering it's been so long since Michael Thomas has been on the field. So that's what I loved most about Michael Thomas. And you can take your victory lap on Jarvis Landry. I'll give you that. He had a good target share this week, but I want to see what his target share looks like when it's not such a negative game script, because they were coming back for most of the game. So we'll see how that goes, because the Falcons actually got a bit of a lead, and then they did their classic choking maneuver. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not saying Jarvis Landry isn't a good pickup, but I just want to see how this carries over if they get in a neutral game script. I mean, they're playing Tampa next week, and it's difficult to get a read on them for me personally, because I didn't expect Dallas to be that bad. So we'll see how that comes out. They did score only 19 points, but it'll be a matchup that they might end up getting behind in. We'll see how it goes.
Well, yeah, I actually thought the Dallas defense played relatively well against Tom Brady. However, this could have been worse. Just a bad overall. We're gonna keep hitting the Cowboys like over and over again in this podcast, even though we're not talking about them. It was bad, dude. Anyway, moving on to the Steelers. Najee Harris, he had some sort of foot or leg injury. We don't know what it is. Either, there's been speculation of him having a high ankle sprain, possibly even re-injuring that Liz Frank injury that he suffered, in camp. It could be even a low ankle injury, which would be less severe. But if he's banged up, and there were also reports that it's not that serious, but I would be looking at Jaylen Warren, on the waiver wire, making sure that he's prioritized, because Liz Frank injuries, that could be tricky. If he re-injured that's not looking good, right for this season, right? It could possibly be, a long-term injury. But that's just speculation. But it could be a high ankle. If it's a high ankle, he could be out 3, 4, 5 weeks, right? So Jaylen Warren did come in the game, played every snap once Najee went out, and he would be their 3-down back. And we kind of knew this going into week 1 that he was going to be their guy. They named him the number 2 back on the depth chart, and he's going to be an every down back. He had a great preseason too. So we know that Tomlin is going to play these guys, as 3-down backs. That's what he does. So he's someone that I'm going to be prioritizing on the waiver wire. Obviously, I want to hear more about this Najee Harris injury. We'll probably hear more about that maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. Hopefully before we put in our waiver claims on Tuesday.
Right. And it's also worth noting that even when Najee was on the field, that inefficiency that we've seen just kind of came up again, and we talked about this, and, we'll get to Saquon. I know you talk about Saquon versus Najee is a big difference in terms of talent, but you see it. He averaged just over 2 yards a carry on 10 attempts, and he didn't have much in the passing game besides that one goal line catch that got him the touchdown. I wasn't totally encouraged even when he was playing, before he got injured. It was a little bit concerning because the Steelers offense as a whole didn't look very good either. I mean, they did win the game, but you're not going to be forcing Joe Burrow into 5 turnovers every week. You're not going to be doing that to any team every week. It's not going to be sustainable. So they have stuff to figure out in the Steelers offense. I wouldn't overreact too much. We'll see how Najee Harris comes back from this, but I wasn't very happy with what I saw from Najee Harris, because I thought it would be going through him if they couldn't get things going, and it just didn't.
Yeah, no, I hear that, man. And by the way, Guess who had a 30% target share on the Steelers? Deontay Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Deontay Johnson back at 30% target share. I think George Pickens only had 2 targets in this game, maybe 1. I don't remember what it was. But Deontay, did you see that catch Deontay made, by the way?
Yeah, the one-hander on the
overtime?
sideline.
Woo!
Yeah, I did see that.
Dude, the guy is good at football. Okay?
Yeah, I'll give him that.
Jesus. All right, let's move on.
It's just too bad his production. You know, he's got so much talent. His production just isn't there yet.
Yeah, and like and at this point, like you said, you know, the product it's going to be a product of this offense now too, right? Like he's going to be capped, right?
Yeah.
The offense doesn't look good right now, and you know, they're going to have to do some real soul searching to see if they can win any more games this year.
Right.
Now let's move on to the Texans real quick. Rex Burkhead, okay, and Dameon Pierce. This is an interesting one, man. Rex Burkhead, 19 opportunities. He had more carries than Dameon Pierce. The Texans, surprisingly, my concern with Dameon Pierce coming into this game was that the Texans were going to be in a negative game script against the Colts. The Colts had one of the highest implied totals for the week, but instead the Texans surprisingly had a positive and neutral game script throughout the game. Pierce was not the guy on the field on most early downs. You know, Burkhead had 5 targets. You know, the entire snaps share was heavily in favor of Rex Burkhead, 70% to 30% snaps. Okay. And Burkhead ran a route on 66% of dropbacks, which is elite.
Yeah.
That's elite usage right there in the pass game for a running back. Okay. So listen, I was shitting on Rex Burkhead before this week, but we knew that he was going to take the passing game role, but he has a lead, quite the lead over Dameon Pierce right now. I'm not going to be spending a whole lot of fab on Rex Burkhead, okay?
Yeah.
Because we know that this can change as weeks go on, as Dameon Pierce kind of gets his feet under him, and we could see, you know, a little bit of an evolution in this backfield, could turn to a 50-50 split. However, Rex Burkhead should be picked up. If he's available in your league, he should be prioritized. Don't spend too much fab, because you don't want to spend fab on an older running back who's oft injured, who doesn't really profile as an early down type of guy. Okay. But 19 opportunities, a lot of that in the pass game. You can actually start him as a flex next week.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. I was really upset because I had a couple of Dameon Pierce shares, and as I'm sure a lot of other people were. I wouldn't take this as like, oh, you know, Rex Burkhead, he's locked in. He's RB1 the rest of the way. That's the way it's going to be now. And that's, you can say that about any team right now or any player going on right now. But it is interesting to see the way he was used, because when Rex Burkhead was playing, you know, he's, like you said, he was running routes. He was catching passes, not just running the ball. Like 14 for 40 on the ground isn't awesome, but he's relevant if he gets the 5 catches, 30 yards that he got, which, you know, for, like you said, if you use him as a flex, that's perfectly fine. You know, you're not worried about him going too crazy. He also didn't score a touchdown. The Texans offense actually looked a lot better than I thought it was going to be, even with the optimism that I had. You know, obviously OJ Howard was catching touchdowns. People are adding him like crazy. I know on the sleeper side, if you're on sleeper, you see that the most added players, like he's at the top of the list. I wouldn't worry about, I wouldn't pick up OJ Howard. You know, he had 2 catches and they were both touchdowns. I don't think that's sustainable. They're not going to be throwing to him too much. Revan Jordan's still number 1. But
I agree.
I was encouraged by the entire Texans offense, because Brandon Cooks, he was solid. You know, Davis Mills was actually, if he's just a little bit better down the stretch of the game, you know, I'd say maybe he's a streamer. He had 2 touchdown passes, but he didn't have much production outside of that. You know, that's just my analysis of Houston offense. But Rex Burkhead and Dameon Pierce was one of the more confusing things that we saw, and you know, it worked out in Rex Burkhead's favor.
Stay patient with Dameon Pierce. Like, I'm not going to be, you know, cutting him or anything. Keep him on your bench, but I can't start him next week. Not if you're playing 30% of snaps. You cannot be in my starting lineup. So keep him on your bench. Don't start him just yet. We could potentially see that snap share get closer. But for now, Burkhead is the play over Dameon Pierce.
Right.
Moving on to Washington. All the talk about Jahan Dotson. You know, we've been talking about him too. Let's take a little victory lap around that.
Yeah.
Me and you. Yeah.
We said that he was going to be solid. You know, that's what he was.
2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns for Jahan Dotson in this game. McLaurin is there. He's just there. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to shit on Terry McLaurin. He's a baller. But it was Curtis Samuel leading the Commanders with 10 targets. He also had 4 carries as well.
He's finally
Okay.
healthy.
For this game, and let's see how let's see how let's see how he does moving forward. But this is a situation where you can kind of take a shot with any of these guys. I mean, McLaurin, you're going to start. Okay, don't panic with him. Start him next week. As a solid wide receiver too. But Jahan Dotson, throw him in your lineup if you want a boom week. Right, he's looking good. That second touchdown catch that he had over the shoulder, that was legit. It was a great catch.
Great pass too.
And listen, guys, like here's the thing, right? Jahan Dotson was a first-round rookie. He was being drafted later than all of these other guys, right? That were hyped. And which rookie had the best day? You know what I'm saying? I mean, Drake London had a solid day, but this dude
he didn't have 2 touchdowns. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm not saying he's going to be the best one, but like, why not take a shot on the cheapest guy who has the draft capital and who's been apparently killing it in camp? It was all there. It was there. We knew it. It wasn't that hard to kind of see that situation, right? But anyway, enough about that. So, how are you picking up Curtis Samuel? Like, is he somebody that you're interested at all? Like, would you throw a couple bucks of your fab dollars? You know what I'm saying? I know we're in a league together, so I'm not trying to hear your trade secrets. But at this point, everything's all out there at this point.
He wasn't being drafted before. If I can get him for dirt cheap, maybe I will, but I'm not going out of my way because I actually like Jahan Dotson more. I think Jahan Dotson has a better chance of sustaining the targets that he got. I mean, obviously he got less than Curtis Samuel, but I think he has a better chance of sustaining work than maybe Curtis Samuel, because Curtis Samuel, at the end of the day, he looked good. I still think he's a gadget guy. I think they like Jahan Dotson a lot. They took him in the first round. Carson Wentz obviously can throw to him. And, I'm encouraged by Curtis Samuel's performance, but I'm not betting on that to be sustained unless I see it for a little bit more. It's just week 1, It's difficult to make a judgment call on any of these things, but if I had to guess, I'd go with Jahan Dotson over Curtis Samuel. So you can have him in our league if you want. I won't.
Jahan Dotson did run 4 more routes than Curtis Samuel, but Curtis Samuel got the 4 carries. And that's something that I'm interested in as well, like to see like if that continues. And he's always been that type of guy. He was a running back in college, right? Yeah. And I'm interested to see if they continue to use him that way. And if they do, stay healthy, dude. You know what I'm saying? That's all. That's all we care about, man. Availability. That's it. I got a couple of sleeper notifications here. I just want to make sure. Nope, that's just our league chat. That's a really good distraction right there.
Right.
But if any news breaks, we still want to kind of talk about it on the stream. Might as well. Okay.
Well, one more thing while we're on that game, and something that I'm a little bit higher on than I thought it was going to be, but after watching it, it kind of has me a little bit hyped. Carson Wentz, he kind of looked really good. I think against granted it's the Jaguars, but he threw for 4 touchdowns. Like, that was shades of the Carson Wentz of old. Those deep passes. He had a deep pass to deep touchdown to Jahan Dotson, deep touchdown to Terry McLaurin. It looked pretty good. The offense didn't look like bad at all. I thought it was gonna be much worse than it was. It looked really good. I mean, like I said, it's the Jaguars, but yeah. I mean, even Antonio Gibson kind of proving everybody wrong. He ended up with 20 points. I didn't think he was going to do that. I wasn't too high on Antonio Gibson. I didn't think he was going to get the usage that he did, but Antonio Gibson was running deep routes too. So like suddenly there's a little bit of gold here.
I like Gibson going into this week. I had him as one of my starts in my start sit post on Instagram. I did like him this week just because the fact that it was going to be a positive game script for him. That's what I figured going into the game, and Brian Robinson wasn't there, so he was going to get goal line stuff. But 8 targets, I was not expecting 8 targets for Gibson. That obviously vaulted him up to those 20 points in PPR league. So good for him. Continue to start him. Who are the Commanders playing next week? See, this is the thing with Antonio Gibson, right? It's really all going to be all game script dependent. They're going up against the Lions next week, so go ahead and start him as a solid RB2. That's what I would say.
This next note that we're talking about, I'm sure pains you.
It's not so bad. Okay, James Robinson. Okay, listen.
Mr. Travis Etienne lover here. Let's see what he has to say.
Would you consider me a Travis Etienne lover or truther?
You've been hyping him up. I think you've been hyping him up.
Yeah. I think he deserves the hype, and I'm going to be buying him in places that I don't have him after this game.
It's fair.
Okay. James Robinson, first of all, it's pretty awesome what James Robinson was able to do coming off the Achilles injury. Everybody counted him out, including myself. Okay. Achilles, potential death blow for running backs. We saw what Cam Akers couldn't even see the field, right, on Thursday night. And James Robinson comes out. He ends up showing out after an Achilles injury. He looks good, by the way. Like, it's not just like, he's just plodding around. No, he was looking good. Okay. And he ended up being the primary early down back, even though ETN was involved. Okay. Now, on early downs, it was James Robinson, 25 snaps at 13 snaps on early downs. Okay. They split goal line snaps. And it was ETN early on in the game. It changed a little bit, after ETN's fumble, like at the end of the second quarter. It kind of switched up a little bit. And it's possible that we do end up seeing more ETN next week because of it. And it's funny because this actually does remind me. We've been talking about the DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams situation. This is literally shaping out to be that. And that's okay, because DeAndre Swift was going to do his thing. Like, forget about what DeAndre Swift did yesterday, because that was awesome. Like, he looked perfect yesterday, right? But think about their usage last year, right? DeAndre Swift was really good. He did a lot of work in the pass game, and ETN, I feel like every time he touched the ball, he was making a big play, and he had 2 missed touchdowns in this game. The first one early on in the game, wheel route, wide open, would have been a touchdown. Trevor Lawrence overthrew him. Second potential touchdown, out in the flat, literally stone hand a pass that would have been a touchdown. So he dropped a pass. The good thing is that drops aren't so sticky. Okay, so you don't look at that and say like, okay, now James Robinson is a passing down guy. No, ETN was their 2-minute guy. He was their passing down guy. And that's really what you care about on the Jaguars. Okay, we have to keep in mind what team this is. They're going to be losing in a lot of games. They're going to be in negative game scripts a ton. And DeAndre Swift benefited because of that last year. So, for me personally, if I need an RB2, I'm trying to buy ETN low for anybody who's scared of James Robinson. I think James Robinson after this game is going to be involved. I think he is. I'm not denying that. And I don't think ETN has that ceiling anymore where he could potentially be the every down back of this offense. We're past that. I don't think it's going to happen, especially with how good James Robinson looked, right? I think ETN's going to be very involved. And I do think that he is the guy that you want to start in this backfield moving forward. But, James Robinson, you could pick him up. There is some value there now. If ETN were to get hurt, James Robinson, could come in as a 3-down back, right? So there is some value to having him stash on your bench. But yeah, like if you do start him, it's kind of like starting Jamal Williams, pretty much.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So we just talked about, Damian Pierce and Rex Burkhead, and now we're talking about James Robinson and Travis Etienne. If you had to start one between Rex Burkhead and James Robinson, who would you pick? Because people might be looking at them on the waivers and be like,
it's a good question. So if I'm looking for a week 2 start, I'm going to start Rex Burkhead. If I'm looking for somebody who could potentially be a solid asset to my fantasy roster for the entire season, I'm going to go James Robinson.
All right. I think that makes sense.
Damian because Pierce. James Robinson is more of a handcuff, and he could be an effective 3-down back if Travis Etienne were to get hurt.
The lines
that's
blurring.
Number one. That's number one. And number 2, and we know how effective he can be in that role because he's done it before. I'm surprised how good he is. He's looking after that Achilles injury. And number 2, he can still plug in for you if you need him, just like Jamal Williams can. And we'll see next week, how close it continues to be, or if Travis Etienne takes a little bit of a lead. It might go back and forth from week to week. But I'm not super. If I have Travis Etienne, I think the panic is a little bit overblown on that situation.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's all you got?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to know.
I think we've kind of been beating this topic to death. You know what I'm saying?
Perfect. He's like, hey, Faraz, listen, man. Like, we get it. You're a Travis Etienne truther. Let's move the fuck on. All right, I understand. All right, so let's move on to Cincinnati now. T. Higgins He sustained a concussion in this game. So keep an eye on his status going into next week.
Mm.
If he does miss, I think Tyler Boyd would get an upgrade if he's out. Tyler Boyd did catch a touchdown after T. Higgins left the game. So if you have Tyler Boyd, you probably drafted him. He's not really available on waiver wires, but you can plug him in your lineup as I would say like a solid wide receiver 3 if Higgins does end up missing. So keep an eye on that. And if you have Higgins, make sure you have a backup ready to go.
Yeah.
In that same game, Pat Frymouth, somebody I wanted to shout out, he had 9 targets. He led the team in receiving, 75% route participation. He's not really available on waiver wires, but based on that usage, he is officially a back end tight end 1. Start him every week.
Yeah. No, and especially on the offense where you don't know who's going to be catching the ball. He's a big target. Obviously, Trubisky likes throwing to him. 9 targets, I was expecting more in the range of 5 to 6, and I would have been happy with that. 9 was just awesome. And that's kind of going along. I had him pegged lightly as a sleeper, as a tight end. I wasn't all over him, but, I thought that once you got out of that range, when you're drafting that territory where it's like, okay, now you got Dallas Goedert, you got Zach Ertz, and then, you start getting the Albert O's and those kind of tight ends. The Pat Frymouth was my target in that range. And I think that that's a really good value for him if he gets this type of target share every week. Really
that's what
encouraging.
You want.
Yeah,
it is, and that route participation 75% is exactly what you're looking for tight ends. That's one of the things that you look for when you're trying to see like, hey, like can this tight end, get enough opportunity for him to come through as a tight end 1. So I'm glad that utilization is there. Moving on, Saquon, man. Let's talk about Saquon Barkley real quick, man. This guy, like we pegged him to bounce back a year removed from his ACL injury. He's looking like his rookie year, man. Hoping that he can stay healthy. 194 total yards, 25 opportunities. He was the Giants' offense. They used him a ton. He was efficient. He was explosive. And looking at this game, and I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, that he had overall RB1 upside.
Mm-hmm.
After looking at this game, that's not so far-fetched.
No, it's not. And, it looked like his rookie season again. It didn't look anything like we've seen the past 2 seasons. It was such a flip on a dime. I wasn't even ready for it. I didn't even think I wasn't as big or high on Saquon as you were. I thought that the inefficiency that we saw would kind of hang around a little bit. I expected him to score, but I didn't expect him to score. How many? What did he have? 2 touchdowns? Was it? He just went.
I think did he have 2 or did he have 1? I don't remember, but he had like almost 40 fantasy points.
Yeah, and how about the receiving work? That was like cherry on top. Like he was great on the ground, but then he's catching, was it 6 out of 8 balls that were thrown his way? Like it was just ridiculous. Like he was the offense, and anytime the ball was moving, it was Saquon. It wasn't like, oh, well, here's Kenny Golladay and our guy Kadarius Toney. Like he wasn't hardly used at all, which was really confusing to me. But Wandale had that. He has a knee injury now. That's what I heard. I saw something about that. Kind of disappointed in that, but that's just all the better for Saquon now, because then now his workload is locked in. And that was for people who drafted Saquon later, that was just like sweet vindication. They got the overall RB1 of the week. It's just insane.
83% route participation for Saquon Barkley. That's better than some wide receivers. High-end wide receivers, okay? The dude is going to ball out this year, and that type of utilization, as long as he stays healthy, is going to be a problem. It's going to be a big problem for anybody going up against Saquon this year in fantasy. Move on, and by the way, Kadarius Toney, he was used on like 4 plays.
Right.
Like it was bad. I'm not sure what's going on with him. Is he going to get traded? Like that's the rumor here. He ran 3 routes in this game. He had 7 snaps. He had 1 carry. And on that 1 carry, which it was more like a lateral, on that 1 play, he looked like a baller. Right? So, like, what's going on? Like, with Wandale getting hurt, Sterling Shepard's there, Kenny Golladay is there. Like, who do you want to get the ball to? You want to get the ball to Kadarius Toney, right? So, what's going on? Maybe they're trading him. That's
Dallas
kind of what I'm thinking. Dallas, like, yo,
we're going back to
they
Dallas.
Need somebody. Otherwise, teams are going to be doubling CeeDee Lamb all game long. That's literally what's going to happen because they have nobody.
Like we saw last night.
Exactly. And Who else? I wanted to mention one other person on the Giants. I forgot. Oh, Sterling Shepard.
Yeah.
You called it. Like I remember you were like, yeah, I can see myself throwing Sterling Shepard in my. I'm like, dude, after an Achilles, like really?
Yeah.
And he didn't get a ton of work. Sterling
No.
Shepard, he only he did run a bunch of routes, but only 2 targets, but one of them was a long touchdown, which is
Yeah.
which
He made
is
it count. He made it
which is
count.
cool. Which is cool.
That wasn't how I thought his production was going to come. I thought it was just going to be,
a
volume.
bunch of targets. Yeah.
Just a
No,
bunch of
I get
targets,
that.
bunch of catches. But,
Exactly.
he got to 15 PPR points anyway. So I'm fine with that.
Moving on to the other New York team. Let's talk about the Jets backfield. Michael Carter, he did play more snaps than Breece Hall. It was a 60-40 split in terms of snaps. This is what we were worried about kind of coming into this game. But they each saw 10 targets. They each ran almost the same number of routes, okay, which is interesting, which is good for Breece Hall, okay?
Yeah.
But Carter did lead them in carries. He got 10 carries to Hall's 6. He was also more efficient with his work. Also, just keep in mind that 10 targets is great, but keep in mind the Jets aren't going to be throwing 60 times every week.
Yeah.
But right now, between the two guys, Carter is probably the guy to start. Right, similar situation with Dameon Pierce and Rex Burkhead. However, Breece Hall is like a potential stud. Right. I'm not saying Dameon Pierce can't be a stud, but Breece Hall was drafted to be that stud, had that college production to be that stud. So like a little bit different here. Okay, just wanted to keep that in mind. But Carter also saw all 3 goal line snaps and all four short yardage snaps in this game. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then the 2-minute offense was with Breece Hall had that locked up. And then he had a lot of third down snaps as well. So the roles were like all over the place, right? Like if you had to guess, like, oh, Breece Hall will get all the early down work and then Carter will be the passing down back. No, it was like all mixed up. They were in on all different types of plays. And to me, this could potentially shift, right? We talked about this before week 1, where yes, we could see a split early, and then it could potentially shift towards Breece Hall's backfield. I can see that happening. When is it going to happen? We don't know. Is it going to take longer than we want? Maybe. Who knows? But right now, the fact that Breece Hall is running the same number of routes as Carter, that's a good sign. The fact that he's being targeted out of the backfield, 10 targets, is a great sign. You might want to be a little bit patient with him. I don't think I'm going to be putting him in my lineups unless you need like a desperate flex. But Carter would be the start for me over Breece Hall as of right now, especially because he's getting the goal line work. But just be patient with Breece Hall. It's going to come. Just gotta wait and see.
Yeah. So, and the other thing for me, and just quick before you go on, I think that they're both kind of relatively startable as a desperate flex, and Michael Carter a little bit more than that. Because this is still Joe Flacco, running the offense. We saw him check down the ball. He threw the ball 59 times, and that number's inflated by targets to running backs because they both got a bunch of targets.
That's true.
They're going to be playing from behind.
That's true. They got about 20 targets, so that means that's about 33% target share to running backs.
Right. So like I just look at it that way. As long as Joe Flacco's a quarterback and they're playing from behind, I think that you have running backs. Joe Flacco clearly will dump it off. He's at the point in his career where that's really what he wants to do. Just dump it off to the running backs and let them try to get something done. Their outlet options, I think that you can kind of take advantage of that if you're really in trouble. Obviously, you don't want to rely on that type of production, but if you have to, I think it'll be there these next few weeks before Zach Wilson's back.
Yeah. And if you're wondering what happened to Elijah Moore, listen, he played the most snaps out of any of these wide receivers. He did still see 7 targets, but the target distribution from Flacco was extremely. It wasn't top heavy at all. He distributed it like crazy across everybody, right? Like Elijah Moore, I'm looking at it right now. Elijah Moore had 7, Corey Davis had 9, Garrett Wilson had 8. And by the way, Braxton Berrios, didn't get it wasn't a full-time receiver like we thought he was. And Corey Davis also kind of in the way. However, we're seeing a lot more routes from Garrett Wilson than we thought we would this early. So that's a good sign. If anybody ends up dropping Garrett Wilson, pick him up, keep him on your bench. He is a very good stash, obviously top 10 pick. This is going to be an interesting situation. But he did run the third most routes among this wide receiver core. Elijah Moore, he is the guy, playing running the most routes. He had 55 routes running this game. Corey Davis was next up with 42. So I'm not so worried about Elijah Moore moving forward. I would keep starting him as a wide receiver 3. I'm just hoping that the target distribution is a little bit more top heavy next week.
Right. No, I hear you.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the Chargers. Keenan Allen, he hurt his hamstring, which sucks. He kind of got a little bit of production for you, before he got hurt, because he was balling out. Like he was on his way to a big game, because on that first drive he was just getting target after target after target. However, Justin Herbert just ended up spreading the ball around like crazy. Allen tied 6 other players with the team leading targets with 4. That included Mike Williams, who only had 2 catches for 10 yards. Like you would have thought that, okay, Keenan Allen's getting hurt, Michael Williams is about to blow up in this game, but nope. Josh Palmer, you thought he was gonna blow up in this game? Nope. It was DeAndre Carter. Right. DeAndre Carter was the guy who ended up having all the production in this game, 2 touchdowns. Palmer though is the one who'll be running the most routes though. Okay, if you look at the 2 and you're like, all right, well, who's going to be running more routes? It's going to be Josh Palmer, because when they go into 2 wide receiver sets, Josh Palmer is going to be on the field with Mike Williams. Okay.
Yeah.
And he also was running a lot out of the slot as well. It wasn't just DeAndre Carter. So if I'm looking at this next week, I'm not sure if I'm going to be playing DeAndre Carter over Josh Palmer. I know that seems like, what you want to do, because DeAndre Carter was the one with the production in this game, but I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about that. But if you're trying to decide between those 2 guys, good luck.
An underrated producer for me, you talk about you picking between Josh Palmer and DeAndre Carter, Gerald Everett. He kind of showed that upside that we were talking about this whole offseason. We've talked about, Gerald Everett. He's an athletic tight end. He's going to be one of the best offenses he's been in. He came through, and he looked actually really good. So I might kind of, if you don't want to pick between Josh Palmer and DeAndre Carter, Everett got targets too, and he produced with them. So, maybe you could start him as a tight end if you're in a bad, not even in a bad spot. If your tight end is banged up, your tight end is like just not, he didn't produce very well. He has a tough matchup coming up, and you think that Everett has a better matchup, I would consider starting him, because this is going to be a big game. It's Thursday night, right? Against the Chiefs.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It could be a huge game, and probably another offensive explosion. I'd pencil Gerald Everett in as a guy he might, behind Mike Williams, hopefully, if Mike Williams leads the team in targets, he might be second or third up next after him, Gerald Everett.
Yeah, I can see that. And, 67% route participation for him. He also was one of the 7 players or 6 players who had 4 targets in this game. And I think, like you said, like he has athletic profile, and we pegged him as somebody who could be very productive. So listen, like if Mike Williams was only going to get 4 targets, and if Josh Palmer was only going to get a few targets, Gerald Everett can also get more. Okay, it's very possible. And the fact that he was running, healthy, 67% isn't like a big number, but that could go up, and we'll see, what happens there. But I agree. I think he is a solid streamer and potentially could be your tight end for the rest of the year. If you're okay starting a low end tight end 1, his opportunities can increase as the season moves on. Now, let me ask you a question, man. What's your concern level on Austin Eckler? It was definitely a timeshare, and we kind of knew that going into the year. But the fact that Sony Michel and Josh Kelly ran a combined 18 routes compared to Eckler's 15, what I'm saying? It doesn't make that much sense to me. Like 15 routes for Eckler like isn't enough, especially when they drop back like 34 times.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we were worried about seeing last season, and it never came to fruition. And we saw what Austin Eckler did, but this is. I'm not going to hit the panic button just yet.
Yeah.
This is a good offense. We know what Austin Eckler can be, but this isn't what we wanted to see at all. I'm not happy about it at all.
Yeah. I'm not happy either.
Yeah, no, because there's no reason that a guy like Sony Michel, who they just added, and, Josh Kelly should be out snapping him in the receiving game and running more routes. There's no reason. Austin Eckler is a premier, if not the premier receiving back in the league. There's no reason for him to be doing that. This kind of had me scratching my head. And, I feel for the Austin Eckler owners out there. I'm not one, but, I feel for them. Start him with confidence next week. I think he's going to be fine. But this is just of course this has to happen. So now suddenly your confidence is shaken up a bit after an awesome season last season. It's like, are we going to get the Austin Eckler of old? where he's competing with a bunch of other guys and they're just not giving him the workload. I'm not worried about that yet, but if this continues, definitely something to monitor.
We saw Austin Eckler get, I think it was 0 targets last year in week 1.
Yeah.
And he turned out to be just fine. So I'm not hitting the panic button like you said just yet. I think the following week after that he had like 8 targets or something. So like, things can change. Hopefully he sees the field more. Like he didn't see the field enough in this game. The positive was that he maintained his goal line role. Okay,
Yeah.
when they got to the goal line, the other running backs came off the field. Austin Eckler was on the field for those, which is a good sign. He didn't lose that role to anybody, which is big. As long as he maintains the type of receiving role he did last year, as long as he maintains that goal line role, this is a great offense to be a goal line back on. He's going to be fine. If you want to try to buy him, sure. But I doubt anybody who's drafted him that early is going to be selling him this early. So I'm not hitting the panic button. Just start him next week. Easy.
Yeah. I think Thursday night's going to be a big indicator of how he's going to be the rest of the season because, like I said, against the Raiders, that's a marquee offensive matchup. It's the same thing with the Chiefs. If he doesn't get the usage that we're hoping to see, then maybe you can be worried about it. Hey, there's a bunch.
Maybe it's because of that. Maybe it's because of the Thursday night game that they kind of kept his workload, not as high as it could have been because they know that they were going to play on Thursday night.
It could be. I mean,
he was coming into this year as, somebody who's like, like maybe I might not want a huge workload, right? And it's like, all right, maybe don't overuse him on Sunday when you have to use him on Thursday.
Right. No, I hear you.
I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch, but I kind of feel like that's a lot of teams are going to be looking at that stuff now because a lot of players do end up getting hurt on Thursdays. And the overuse is real. Like players talk about it. Like they're not healed by Thursday after playing on Sunday. So, something to think about. Okay, let's move on. Hayden Hurst, back to Cincinnati. Well, we're really bouncing back and forth, aren't we? Hayden Hurst, I guess I was looking at tight ends. He ran around on 79% of dropbacks. He had 7 targets. Okay. That's pretty good usage on a good offense, right?
Yeah.
Joe Burrow threw a bunch of picks. Their offense is going to be fine. Not worried about it. They'll get it right. And when they do, if Hayden Hurst is running a route on almost 80% of dropbacks, I think he could be pretty good. And I think he could be, I'm not rushing to the waiver wire to get him, but he's somebody that you want to put on your watch list just in case you're streaming tight ends.
Okay. Yeah. Especially if T. Higgins is missing time. It's just more targets for him, more targets to go around.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about this Packers backfield, dude. Aaron Jones, he only saw 10 opportunities in this game, 5 carries, 5 targets. 5 targets, great. That's what you want to see. That's enough, right? You were hoping that he was getting like 7 or 8 because all these Packers wide receivers not doing their thing. Aaron Rodgers clearly frustrated, right, with that situation. Aaron Jones did outsnap AJ Dillon 60-40. Okay. But AJ Dillon, 10 carries, 6 targets. He also had a role on 3rd down. He was their main goal line back as well. Okay. So we're seeing a situation, by the way, AJ Dillon looking smooth in the pass game also. So we were talking about this recently, right, on the pod and saying like, you know what, like AJ Dillon might be pretty involved in the pass game. He might be the goal line back. So if that's the case, even in a shared role, he might be startable every single week.
And I think he is still startable every week. And this is just like, I'm more disappointed with Aaron Jones' performance than I am, impressed with AJ Dillon.
Yeah, I agree.
They're both good running backs, and I anticipated AJ Dillon to do well and Aaron Jones to do well, but I'm kind of worried if I'm an Aaron Jones owner now because we talked about the whole thing, them being 1A and 1A in the Packers backfield, and AJ Dillon was going 4 or 5 rounds later than Aaron Jones, and now it's come to fruition that AJ Dillon's producing more than Aaron Jones at this point. It's such a difficult one to gauge. AJ Dillon is the guy that I'll be starting every week. Aaron Jones, I'll still start him. It was an off day for the Packers. It was. The offense does not look the same without Devontae Adams, obviously. So I'm not worried. I'm not panicking on them yet, but if I'm Aaron Jones, I'm definitely sweating a little bit.
No, for sure. And it's funny because like you mentioned all these ballers, you guys are probably noticing that we're not talking about the ballers because they're balling, right? Justin Jefferson, or we talked about AJ Brown too, but Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, dude, getting that ridiculous target share from Derek Carr, which is amazing. Not something that I expected. I thought Derek Carr was way too nice for that. And I thought he
Mhm.
would, nice as in like a nice person, and wanted to get Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow their targets. But no,
Hunter
targeting
Renfrow
Devontae
is
Adams.
quiet.
Devontae Adams putting corners through the blender, dude. Like,
Yeah,
are you like that route on the left side?
I
Like, I
know.
think it was
Where he
Asante.
came wide open.
I think it was Asante Samuel Jr., right?
Yeah.
Where he just like put him in a blender. The dude did a little spinner Rooney, and like
Mhm.
he didn't even know where Devontae was. I'm like,
Right.
yo,
Yeah.
this dude is on another level, man. But anyway, Derek Carr, giving him his targets. Look at those top 4 receivers drafted: Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. In that group, didn't come through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Devontae Adams.
But
Devontae Adams, I listen. I thought CeeDee Lamb was going to make that jump this year, but week 1 didn't happen.
uh,
Now Dak is hurt. Ain't going to happen anytime soon.
it's week 1. All right. If Dallas goes and gets Jimmy Garoppolo, I can maybe hang my hat on that for a CD almost breakout. It's not the same, obviously.
It's not the
same. But this is the thing. The thing that worried the most, since we're on CD, the thing that worried me the most about seeing CD Lamb is those targets weren't being demanded. Is they were being shoved in between double, triple coverage for no reason. CD Lamb was not getting very much separation. And he just then you look at Devontae Adams, you look at Justin Jefferson, who are coming wide open, and they're like the elite route runners, they're elite receivers. That's what you expect from that type of player, especially if you draft them that high. And CD Lamb did not look like that. And that was extremely disappointing.
And listen, I had CeeDee Lamb extremely high ranked coming into this year now. But in the back of my mind, there was always the argument of players early in their career demanding the target share. Okay. CeeDee Lamb, up until this point, even though it's only been 2 years, but now where we're at in these NFL wide receivers' careers is that even in the first 2 years, you should show a sign that you're able to command 25% target share on your team. And if you don't, then there's a chance that you're never going to be that player. Okay.
You're not that guy.
And there is some data to support that. But it's the data isn't too long lived, right? In terms of like how many years that holds up. But it's a more of a recent phenomenon. And it's possible that CeeDee Lamb is just not that dude. That guy in the supermarket who says, "You're just not that guy, pal. You're not that guy." It's possible that CeeDee Lamb's not that guy. And we're gonna find out. I'm not labeling him that just now, but it's an interesting thing to note. Okay. It's an interesting thing to kind of keep in mind when you're projecting these wide receivers moving forward.
The other thing that I do want to say quick before we go on with CeeDee Lamb, CeeDee Lamb might not be that guy. If he is that guy, it still doesn't really matter because even when Dak was playing, the Cowboys offense was so out of sorts, they did nothing. The offense did not look anything close to what they had last season, except the best player, I think, watching them last night was Zeke. He looked decent carrying the ball. True. Like outside of that,
and for some reason they just went away from him.
Yeah. So it's like the complete opposite of last season where, he wouldn't do anything and they just keep handing it to him. And Tony Pollard's sitting there like, when is it my turn? And now this season, Zeke's averaging 5 or 6 yards a carry and they're going away and they're shoving the ball into triple coverage to CeeDee Lamb.
And they're bringing in Pollard, who wasn't really effective yesterday. Right. And it's just like, what are you guys doing? I didn't understand that at all, man.
That's what I said. So CeeDee Lamb, for where he was drafted, I'm not happy at all. I'm very that's the closest I am of all the players. I'm closest to hitting the panic button on CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't blame you. Now, obviously, you got to downgrade this whole offense with Dak Prescott. He's going to get surgery today on his thumb. He's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. Not great for this Cowboys offense, obviously.
Right.
I'm still starting CeeDee Lamb next week. I'm not starting him as a wide receiver 1, though. I'm going to start him as a wide receiver 2, unfortunately. And, Cooper Rush is going to be at the helm, unless, like you said, they trade for someone like Jimmy Garoppolo. It's possible, maybe.
I think that's the only way.
6 to 8 weeks is a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're not going to trade for somebody, if you're not going to trade for Jimmy G, before week 2, you're giving up on the season.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that's what they want to do. Jerry Jones is not that type of owner, not that type of GM. Right.
No. So yeah, that's what it is. This is just a long-term thing, but if things don't improve, this could be a potential, blow up the roster type situation. We might not see Zeke back. And depending on how Dak looks coming back from the injury, if they're really bad this season, and they end up with high draft capital, maybe they take a swing, at one of the guys coming out of college next season. It's a loaded quarterback class. I know I'm speculating.
Oh, baby.
But
Oh baby, I love it. I love it.
Dak did not look good. Now he's injured. He's been injured more recently. He's been injured more often than not recently. So, you got to kind of start thinking. And it's just the way things are going. Like Mike McCarthy could be out. This could be a team set for huge turnover. But regardless, this doesn't look at all like the Cowboys offense that we saw last season.
I hear you, man. All right, let's move on. So we only got a couple more things. In that same game, Chris Godwin had a hamstring injury after what, a lot of medical professionals are calling rushing him back to play. And now he suffered something that is very common for players if they do rush and come back, which is that hamstring injury. So at this point, I think that they're going to take it slow with him now, right? And I think they're going to let him fully come back. My guess is he's going to be out for at least week 2, possibly a couple weeks after that, but we'll see, how they're going to handle it. Russell Gage, he did run most of his routes out of the slot once Godwin left the game. He didn't see much of the game because they were going primarily Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. And Russell Gage did come on the field and was almost a full-time player when Godwin left the game. So I think he's in play to be in lineups next week, Russell Gage against New Orleans. And, I feel like every Tampa Bay skill player at some point got banged up in this game. I feel like, Mike Evans hobbled off at some point. Julio Jones, like after every catch, his back was hurting. Leonard Fournette limped off the field at some point, and then Rachaad White came in. But it seems like all those guys are fine. I think the only major concern is Chris Godwin at this point.
Right. And like you said, just touching on Fournette, very good running the ball.
He looked good, man.
Good. Yeah, he looked really good. And whether that, it's weird because Dallas' defense, you're going to say they look bad because he was running all over them, but they didn't allow a lot of points. I think Leonard Fournette didn't even cash in on the touchdown upside that he should have the rest of the way. Very encouraging.
It is very encouraging. And, we thought that this Tampa offensive line might not be as good, but they looked great in this game.
Yeah, it was actually very good.
And they're a huge part of his success. And once he reached that second level, he was breaking tackles at that point. So it was just an overall great night for the Tampa Bay running game. And I think that's all we had, man. I wanted to kind of keep it at an hour. So appreciate everybody who tuned in. Those are the major storylines there. Again, if you have questions, just reach out. I'm going to hit a post on Instagram very shortly. So put your questions in there. I'll try to be around for about 30 minutes on Instagram in the comments. So I'll see you guys there. Thanks for joining. This is going to be on the podcast, obviously, if you need to re-listen to this. Appreciate you guys. Jack, take it easy. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time for a waiver wire episode. Take it easy.